Hello, I got my first allotment in 2019 and the second one I got in 2020. So you can't go and get a second allotment. You need to become a co-worker with somebody else and work on their allotment for some time before you can take over that allotment. There was somebody I knew recommended I took on the second allotment and became a co-worker with somebody that was next to them. So that was the reason that I took on the second one in 2020, because I wasn't planning on getting a second allotment that quickly. But when the opportunity presented itself, I took it on. I got this allotment in 2020, just before the COVID lockdown started. Parts of the allotment were neglected, so it needed a clear up. Skips were regularly provided by the council, and I did put a lot of material in the skips. I was left with quite a bit of rubbish still on the allotment, and cleared some and collected in areas, waiting for more skips. Unfortunately, the skips stopped due to COVID, and they are no longer provided. The council offers a free rubbish removal service in the first year of a tenancy. As I'd officially taken the allotment in April 2022, I had until April 2023 to make use of the rubbish removal service. So I decided to get rid of all the rubbish on the plot and have it removed. This included the lean-to shed and the Anderson shelter, which had been full of material stockpiled by previous tenants that no one had sorted through for years. I decided it was time this stuff was cleared out and got rid of to free up some space. There were still things in the shed that needed to be used, recycled, or given away to others. Once the Anderson shelter was cleared, I could move some of this into there and free up space in the shed. There were a lot of small cleanup jobs, and I wanted to get on with the jobs and not waste time making a video of me essentially moving rubbish about, which is boring. So I took some photos as I was doing things to show progress. I haven't included everything as it would take too long, but I hope you get something out of this. I started with cutting down the brambles and privet that were covering the lean-to shed. These will be used to burn the stumps later. I already have a pile of rubbish gathered by the gate, ready for collection by the rangers for taking to the dump. The wood that could be burnt went to my neighbour to heat his shed and greenhouse. This was quite a substantial amount by the time I'd finished the clear up, but some could not be burnt and had to be taken to the dump. Once the front of the lean-to shed was clear, I could start to see what was in it and decide what could be cleared. There was quite a lot of material that had been put on top of each other. Some, like the windows, were taken by other allotment holders, but there was a lot of rubbish, such as big insulation boards that were no longer usable. I stored these on the front of the shed for collection by the ranger, and some bits, such as wooden boards, were separated for other allotment holders to come and collect. So by the end of the day, the front was cleared. Now that the front was cleared and more material separated, I could use more builders' bags to store the rubbish at the front of my plot. Once I had most of the rubbish cleared out, I was left with a few large items and lots of scrap metal. These were taken to the scrap metal dealer for recycling, but some useful items were kept as they could be used for brackets, etc. The old desk was in poor shape and was scrapped. There were lots of windows and large pieces of styrofoam that a neighbour wanted. The person who had this allotment for years worked in a nursery, so he had stockpiled loads of pots, tools and big bags of lime, which had got damp and became one solid heavy lump. These had to be thrown away, but this barrel full of lime was kept as it was lumpy but usable, and I wanted to keep the barrel anyway. There were some usable bits of metal and linoleum from the lean-to shed that I kept to use later. These windows, along with the ones in the shed, were taken to the car park and were taken away by other allotment holders. Now that the lean-to shed was almost clear, something that I was worried about is quite clear. Its roof was attached to the side of the shed, and as it is collapsing, it is pulling the side of the shed away. After cutting the brambles and privet, I've set up a barrel to burn out the stumps, using the dried up brambles that were kept on top of the hedge. I put some in the barrel, using the metal pole to hold it steady, set fire to this, and added brambles and sticks to burn the stumps. Once it was cooled down at the end of the day, I lifted the barrel, and as you can see, the stump is completely burnt out and killed off. I repeated this for the other bramble stumps. The lean-to shed is finally cleared. I discovered that the floor is concrete, which is covered by the detritus. We can see how bad the side of the shed is, and the weight of the roof of the lean-to shed is pulling the wood away. But the wood is in quite poor condition anyway, rotten and full of woodworm. The sides of the lean-to shed are also in such poor shape and rotten that they are collapsing, so they need to be taken down. Once I cleared the floor, the concrete floor and the sides of an old structure became visible, and once it was swept clean, it looks like a very usable space. Now that the floor of the lean-to shed and around it was cleared, I could remove the sides, including the hose reel and the roof, but I had to wait till I had help from someone to hold up the sides, as it was already pulling the timber from the main shed, and if it collapsed, it could damage the sides of the main shed. So I decided to start clearing out the rusty old Anderson shelter, hoping that it would not fall on my head. There was all sorts in there, including lots of wood, most of which was too rotten to be used, as well as metal, plastic pots, and who knew what else. I moved the corrugated metal to the top of the baths and discovered a big heavy metal door. I may have a use for this, so decided to keep it. Once those came out, I could see what was behind them, including big brambles that were growing among the rubble, and the layers upon layers upon layers of things crammed on top of each other. Once some of that was removed, I could see there were more foam, doors, and windows, even a kitchen sink, and plenty of trays full of pots. The wood wasn't usable, but the kitchen sink was. Finding the kitchen sink was unexpected, but it was in good condition, so I kept it till I could find it a good home. There were lots of terracotta pots in with the rubbish on the left side. I cleared the front right-hand side first, so I could see what was at the back. Several terracotta chimney pots and large wheels from old-style wheelbarrows, and an actual old-style wheelbarrow. This was easy to shift, but the wheelbarrow was wedged in and took a while to dig out. Definitely an antique, but too far gone for restoration. I put the chimney pots out of the way, so the right-hand side was nearly cleared. I started cleaning the pots from the left side till I got to the bottom layers. I could see the supports for the shelter and how slanted they were, and it looked like it could fall down if the supports were not fixed. So once the ground was clear enough, I did my best to straighten the supports, which was difficult as they were originally put in slanted. I also added more timber supports. There was some stained glass from windows, but most of them were damaged, so the only thing I could do was take out the lead for recycling. We have a spot between the Chippings Bay and the car park where unwanted items are left for other allotment holders to take and use. And I kept taking pots, useful timber, doors, windows, etc. And everything was taken away within a few hours. Sometimes they were gone by the time I brought the next lot up. The stained glass was damaged, so the only option was to take the lead out for recycling. It was a fiddly, time-consuming job, but necessary. The Anderson shelter was finally cleared out and supports put in place. It was ready for levelling the ground and putting things to keep back in. It is quite a big space, so the wheelbarrow should give you an idea of how big it is. A friend came round to collect some pots, and when he saw the Anderson shelter, he said, "Oh, you've got a stable." The old lean-to shed was demolished, and the bits that were not usable or burnable left on the side of the shed. There was a lot of rubbish accumulated at the front of the allotment, waiting for the ranger to take them away. I started putting things back into the Anderson shelter, but it's in a bad state, especially the roof. So I covered that with some of the corrugated metal sheets. So why didn't I get rid of the Anderson shelter, which would have been easier? These were used during World War II to protect people during air raids. After the war, Most were scrapped, but some people brought them onto their allotments to use as a storage space. There are not many of them left now. This one has been here for 80 years and is still standing despite the ravages of time. I wasn't going to be the one to destroy all that history. Decided to put the terracotta chimney pots at the back till I have time to deal with them. The back was falling apart. I had some boards and doors separating my allotment from the one behind it, so used them to repair the back of the Anderson shelter. This hawthorn tree between the allotments is a pain as the branches keep growing into my plot, and despite constant pruning, it gets covered by bindweed during the summer. So I put a fence panel there to keep it out and used a big water tank to hold it in place. It is tightly wedged between the tree and the tank, so it is not going anywhere. Now I could put things back in and started with the usable wood and timber. I put down some stones and thick wire mesh, and a piece of vinyl was used to keep the wood off the ground and dry. I put some of the wood on these and added some from the shed, which cleared up an area in the shed which was used to store tools out of the way. Finally, the Anderson shelter was filled with usable and recyclable stuff, organized so that I can deal with them later, which helped clear the clutter from around the allotments. Now it was time to remove the carpet from the future fruit bed, so I made a start on this. My neighbour Tony uses carpet on his plot and brings in carpet offcuts, and he was happy to take away usable carpet. The carpet was covered in soil and weeds, but after some digging, I rolled up the lowest layers to get to the soil underneath, to find weed roots still ready to go after being covered with carpet after several years. The top layers were in good condition, so as I lifted the layers of carpet from the bed, Tony took most of it, but some lower layers were in tatters and had to be thrown away. I picked out a lot of bindweed roots from under the carpet and dealt with the grass and weeds that had grown through the carpet, so had a lot of nasties to deal with. But once the carpet is rolled up, it can go to Tony to use on other allotments. I didn't ask questions about why he was using all this carpet. I was just pleased to get rid of it. More trays of pots and things went into the Anderson shelter to clear up space on the allotment. I will use what I need and give away the rest. Finally, all the carpet had been rolled up and the ground was clear, ready to be covered and mulched with wood chips. I had a pallet with 3-meter pieces to be used later, so took it apart while there was a clear space. We had some heavy snow, so didn't go to the allotment for a few days. When I did, I discovered that the mice had dug up and eaten the peas that were in the greenhouse. Checked on the crops allotment and the cage had collapsed. The supporting hoops had snapped under the weight of the snow. They couldn't be repaired, so I would remove this cage and rebuild with something more sturdy. But the good news was that the asbestos was cleared from the allotment by the council specialist whilst I was away. Well, that cleanup took a lot more time than I expected. But I'm happy that things are a bit more organised and less cluttered. There's still a few bits left to sort out, but the bulk of it has been done. And there's still a few jobs to do. Now I can get on with preparing for planting the early crops.